What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what he thinks is a routine morning show interview, only to find himself ambushed by a host with a personal agenda? Samuel L. Jackson thought he was sitting down for a friendly chat about his latest film project, but George Stephanopoulos had other plans. Plans that would turn a simple promotional appearance into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory. The tension was immediate. The accusations were ruthless. And Jackson's response was nothing short of legendary. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you are about to witness will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television interviews. The Good Morning America studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy when Samuel L. Jackson settled into the guest chair, adjusting his signature leather jacket and flashing that familiar smile that had charmed audiences for decades. The legendary actor had done this routine hundreds of times before, promoting films, sharing stories, connecting with viewers over their morning coffee. Today was supposed to be no different. A quick 10-minute segment about his upcoming thriller, some light banter, maybe a funny anecdote or two. George Stephanopoulos shuffled through his notes behind the anchor desk, his expression unreadable as he prepared for what the audience assumed would be another standard celebrity interview. The cameras rolled, the red lights glowed, and millions of viewers across America settled in for what they expected to be an entertaining start to their day. We are back with Academy Award nominee Samuel L. Jackson. Stephanopoulos began, his voice carrying its usual authoritative tone. Samuel, thank you for being here this morning. Always a pleasure, George, Jackson replied, leaning back comfortably in his chair. Good to see you again. But something was different in Stephanopoulos' demeanor, a subtle shift that Jackson picked up on immediately. The host's smile seemed forced, his posture more rigid than usual, and there was an intensity in his eyes that suggested this conversation was going to venture into unexpected territory. Now, we are here to talk about your new film, Stephanopoulos continued, glancing down at his notes with deliberate slowness. But I think our viewers would be more interested in discussing some of the controversial statements you have made recently about the film industry, and well, certain political figures. Jackson's eyebrows raised slightly, his famous composure intact, but a flicker of confusion crossing his features. Controversial statements. I am not sure what you are referring to, George. I am here to talk about the movie. Stephanopoulos leaned forward, his journalist instincts taking over as he sensed an opportunity to create television gold. Come on, Samuel. You know exactly what I am talking about. Your comments last month about Hollywood's treatment of veteran actors, your criticism of certain network executives, and let's not forget your rather pointed remarks about media personalities who, quote, do not know their place. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and equipment. Jackson's expression shifted from confusion to something more guarded, his legendary intensity beginning to surface as he realized this was not going to be the friendly promotional chat he had signed up for. I think there might be some misunderstanding here, Jackson said carefully, his voice maintaining its characteristic calm, but with an edge that longtime fans would recognize as a warning sign. I came here to discuss my work, not to be interrogated about comments taken out of context. Stephanopoulos pressed on, clearly emboldened by what he perceived as Jackson's defensive response. Taken out of context. These were direct quotes. Samuel, you specifically criticized news anchors who, and I quote, think they can push around guests just because they have a platform. Were you perhaps referring to someone in particular? The camera captured every micro-expression on Jackson's face, as the realization dawned that this was not an accidental confrontation. This was planned, orchestrated, and designed to put him on the defensive. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his hands clasped together in his lap, and his eyes locked onto Stephanopoulos with the kind of focus that had made him one of cinema's most compelling presences. You know what, George, Jackson said, his voice dropping to that low measured tone that moviegoers knew preceded something memorable. I think you have got this whole situation backwards. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my film, and now you are trying to turn this into some kind of gotcha moment. That's not professional, and it's certainly not respectful. Stephanopoulos, sensing that he was getting the reaction he wanted, doubled down with the confidence of someone who believed his position as host gave him the upper hand. I think our viewers deserve transparency. Samuel, when a public figure makes statements that could be interpreted as threats or intimidation tactics, don't we have a responsibility to address that? The word threats hung in the air like a challenge, and Jackson's response was immediate and electric. His entire demeanor shifted in an instant, the laid-back movie star persona dropping away to reveal the sharp, uncompromising individual beneath. Threats, Jackson repeated, his voice rising slightly, but still controlled. Did you just accuse me of making threats on national television? Are you out of your mind? The tension in the studio was now palpable, crew members exchanging glances as they realized they were witnessing something far beyond the usual promotional interview. Stephanopoulos, perhaps not fully prepared for the intensity of Jackson's response, tried to maintain his composure, while clearly feeling the shift in momentum. I am simply asking you to clarify your previous statements, Stephanopoulos said, but his voice carried less conviction than before. When you said that some media personalities need to learn their place, what exactly did you mean by that? Jackson leaned forward in his chair, his eyes never leaving Stephanopoulos' face. And when he spoke, every word carried the weight of decades of experience dealing with exactly this kind of manufactured controversy. What I meant, George, and what any reasonable person would understand, is that journalists should focus on journalism instead of trying to create drama where none exists. But clearly, that message went right over your head. The studio audience, which had been quietly watching what they thought was a normal interview, began to murmur as they sensed the growing hostility between the two men. Stephanopoulos, now visibly uncomfortable, but committed to his chosen path, pushed forward with what would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation. Well, some might say that your reaction right now proves exactly the point I was trying to make about your temperament and your ability to handle criticism. The words were barely out of Stephanopoulos' mouth when Jackson's expression transformed completely. The simmering tension that had been building throughout the exchange suddenly crystallized into something much more dangerous, and everyone in the studio knew that the real confrontation was about to begin. Jackson sat back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face, but it was not the warm, friendly expression viewers had seen at the beginning of the interview. This was something entirely different, the kind of smile that appeared in his films right before he delivered a line that audiences would quote for years to come. My temperament, Jackson repeated slowly, savoring each syllable as if he were tasting something particularly interesting. George, let me tell you something about temperament. You have been sitting behind that desk for years, thinking that your little platform gives you the right to disrespect your guests, to twist their words, and to create controversy where none exists. And you want to talk to me about temperament? Stephanopoulos shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly realizing that he had crossed a line he should have left alone. The confidence he had displayed moments earlier was evaporating rapidly as Jackson's legendary presence filled the studio. Samuel, I think you are overreacting, Stephanopoulos said, his voice betraying the first hints of nervousness. I was simply trying to have an honest conversation about your public statements. Jackson laughed, a sound that carried no humor whatsoever. Honest conversation. Is that what you call this ambush? You brought me here under false pretenses. You have been misking me since the moment I sat down, and now you are trying to gaslight me into thinking this is normal behavior. Do you really think I am that stupid? The camera operators were having a field day, capturing every angle of the confrontation as it unfolded. This was no longer an interview. It was a masterclass in how to dismantle someone's credibility in real time, and Jackson was the professor. I resent the implication that I brought you here under false pretenses, Stephanopoulos protested, but his words rang hollow in the charged atmosphere of the studio. We are simply having a discussion about issues that matter to our viewers, issues that matter to your viewers. Jackson's voice rose, his famous intensity now fully unleashed, or issues that matter to your ratings. Because let's be real here, George, this is not about journalism. This is about you trying to create a viral moment at my expense. The problem is, you picked the wrong person to mess with today. Stephanopoulos attempted to regain control of the situation, falling back on his years of experience handling difficult interviews. Samuel, I understand you are upset, but I think if you would just calm down and listen to the questions I am asking. The word calm proved to be the match that lit the fuse. Jackson's eyes flashed with an intensity that made everyone in the studio take notice, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that had made him one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. Calm down. Did you just tell me to calm down on national television after you ambushed me with false accusations and twisted my words? Are you completely out of your mind? The studio fell silent, except for the war of cameras capturing every moment of Jackson's controlled fury. Stephanopoulos, now visibly sweating under the studio lights, tried to maintain his composure, but was clearly losing the battle. I was not trying to ambush you, Stephanopoulos said weakly, his earlier bravado completely gone. I was simply trying to get clarification on some statements that have been widely reported. Jackson leaned forward, his presence dominating the space between them. Widely reported by who? By gossip blogs and tabloids looking for clicks. And you decided to give their garbage legitimacy by bringing it to a national news program. That's not journalism, George. That's exploitation. The host tried one more time to salvage the situation, but his voice lacked any conviction. I think you are being unfair in your characterization of my questions. Unfair. Jackson's laugh was sharp and cutting. You want to talk about unfair? Unfair is inviting someone to promote their work and then blindsiding them with manufactured controversy. Unfair is taking comments out of context and presenting them as something they are not. Unfair is using your position as a host to try to embarrass your guests for entertainment value. Stephanopoulos looked around the studio as if seeking support from his crew, but found only uncomfortable faces staring back at him. The man who had started this confrontation with such confidence was now clearly regretting his decision to pick a fight with one of Hollywood's most formidable personalities. "Samuel, I think there has been a misunderstanding," Stephanopoulos said, his voice barely above a whisper as he tried to find an exit strategy from the disaster he had created. Jackson shook his head, his expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "Oh, there has definitely been a misunderstanding. George misunderstood who you were dealing with. You thought you could push me around like some inexperienced actor desperate for publicity. You thought you could put words in my mouth and I would just sit here and take it. That was your first mistake." The energy in the studio was electric, with crew members and audience members alike transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. This was not the sanitized, controlled environment of typical morning television. This was raw, unfiltered, and completely unpredictable. "Your second mistake," Jackson continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "was thinking that your little gotcha questions would somehow intimidate me. I have been in this business longer than you have been on television, and I have dealt with people far more skilled at manipulation than you will ever be." Stephanopoulos made one last desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. "I think we should probably move on to discussing your film." "Oh, now you want to discuss my film?" Jackson's voice dripped with sarcasm. "After you have spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy my reputation with your twisted version of journalism. It's a little late for that, don't you think?" The host was now completely out of his depth, his usual smooth delivery replaced by stammering attempts to find words that might somehow salvage the situation. "I never intended to attack your reputation." Jackson stood up from his chair, his imposing presence filling the studio as he looked down at the increasingly desperate host. "Intentions don't matter, George. Actions matter, and your actions today have shown everyone watching exactly what kind of person you really are." The studio light seemed to dim in comparison to the intensity radiating from Jackson as he towered over the anchor desk. Stephanopoulos looked smaller than ever, hunched in his chair like a student being disciplined by the principal. The power dynamic had completely reversed and everyone in the building knew it. "You know what the real tragedy is here," George Jackson said, his voice now carrying a quiet intensity that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier outburst. "You had the opportunity to have a genuine conversation with me about my work, about the industry, about the craft that I have dedicated my life to. Instead, you chose to turn this into a cheap ambush for ratings." Stephanopoulos opened his mouth to respond, but Jackson held up a hand, silencing him with nothing more than a gesture. "I am not finished talking," Jackson said firmly. "You wanted to interview Samuel L. Jackson. Well, congratulations. You are getting the full experience. See, the thing about respect, George, is that it's a two-way street. You give it, you get it, you take it away, and well, this is what happens." The host's face was now visibly pale under the studio makeup, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he realized the full extent of his miscalculation. This was not going to be something he could edit out or spin in his favor. This was live television, and millions of people were watching him get systematically destroyed by one of Hollywood's most respected figures. "You sit there behind that desk every morning thinking you are some kind of authority figure," Jackson continued, his voice growing more passionate with each word. "But let me tell you something about authority. It comes from knowledge, from experience, from earning people's respect. It does not come from a teleprompter and a fancy suit." Stephanopoulos finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "Samuel, please, I think we can resolve this misunderstanding." Jackson's laugh was sharp and unforgiving. "Resolve it, George. You cannot resolve 15 years of arrogance and unprofessionalism in a 5-minute conversation. This is not a misunderstanding. This is you showing your true colors on national television." The camera captured every moment as Jackson began to pace slightly, his movements controlled but predatory. He was in complete command now, and Stephanopoulos could do nothing but watch his own professional reputation crumble in real time. "You want to know what I really think about media personalities who do not know their place?" Jackson asked, turning back to face the trembling host. "I think they are insecure little people who use their platforms to try to tear down others because they lack the talent or integrity to build anything meaningful themselves." The words hit Stephanopoulos like physical blows, each one carefully chosen and devastatingly accurate. The man who had started this interview with such confidence was now slumped in his chair, looking like he wanted nothing more than to disappear. "And the saddest part," Jackson continued, his voice now carrying a note of genuine disappointment, "is that you probably think you are doing good journalism. You probably think that ambushing your guests and creating controversy where none exists makes you some kind of hard-hitting reporter, but it does not. George, it makes you a bully with a microphone." Stephanopoulos made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of the interview. "I never meant to bully you, Samuel. I was just trying to do my job." Jackson stopped pacing and fixed the host with a stare that seemed to see right through him. "Your job is to inform the public, to ask thoughtful questions, to facilitate meaningful conversations. Your job is not to ambush people for entertainment value or to boost your own ego by trying to make your guests look bad. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usual background noise of the studios seemed to have stopped as everyone waited to see what Jackson would do next. The actor looked around the studio, taking in the faces of the crew members, the producers, the audience members who had witnessed this unprecedented meltdown. "You know what, George?" Jackson said finally, his voice now calm, but carrying an unmistakable finality. "I came here as a professional, ready to do a professional interview. But since you decided to turn this into something else entirely, let me leave you with some free advice." Stephanopoulos looked up, hopefully, perhaps thinking that Jackson was about to offer some kind of olive branch or graceful exit from the disaster. "The next time you decide to ambush one of your guests," Jackson said, his voice dropping to that trademark whisper that somehow carried more power than any shout, "make sure you are prepared for them to fight back, because not everyone is going to sit there quietly while you try to destroy their reputation for your own amusement." With that, Jackson reached down and unclipped his microphone, the small gesture somehow carrying enormous symbolic weight. He was removing himself from control, reclaiming his autonomy in the most public way possible. "I will be promoting my film elsewhere," Jackson announced, his voice now carrying across the studio without the need for amplification. "Somewhere where they understand the difference between journalism and ambush tactics." Stephanopoulos sat, frozen in his chair, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but watch as one of Hollywood's biggest stars walked away from his show in the most humiliating fashion possible. The host, who had thought he could control the narrative, had lost control completely, and everyone in America had watched it happen. Jackson paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time to look at the man who had made the catastrophic mistake of underestimating him. "Oh, and George," Jackson said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned studio. "Next time you want to question someone's temperament, make sure you can handle it when they show you exactly what real temperament looks like." With that final devastating line, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind a host whose career would never fully recover from the encounter, and creating a moment of television that would be replayed and discussed. For years to come, the cameras continued rolling, capturing Stephanopoulos sitting alone at his desk, staring at the empty chair where Jackson had been, the full weight of his professional humiliation settling over him like a dark cloud. The man who had started the morning thinking he could create television gold had instead created his own professional nightmare, and there was no editing room in the world that could fix what had just happened. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Did Samuel L. Jackson handle George Stephanopoulos the right way, or should he have taken a different approach? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment.